I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Matt Coyle. Matt is the best-selling author of the Rick Cahill PI Crime series. He was named the 2021 San Diego Writers Festival Mystery Writer of the Year, and his novels have won the Anthony Award, the Shamus Award, the Lefty Award, and the San Diego Book Award, among others. He has also received nominations for numerous Anthony, Macavity, Shamus, and Lefty Awards. Odyssey's End is the 10th book in this award-winning series. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm with each year that passes, I wonder how long I can use that 2021 San Diego Writer Festival Award. Although really all the other awards, they don't have any dates attached to them, so why not? I can use it forever.
There you go. And you still will hold the honor of having it forever from 2021. So
Yeah, I have the award, actually. Very cool.
Yeah, it's an accomplishment. I think you should hold on to it.
Oh, I'm going to.
Awesome. Well, this is a great bio, but can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, I've been writing for uh seriously writing for I think about 21 years. Took me about 10 years to get published.
Okay.
This is my 10th book. It's probably a 10th book in 11 and a half years.
Wow.
I knew I wanted to be a writer a million years ago when I was a little kid, and it is many decades ago. My father gave me The Simple Art of Murder by Raymond Chandler, and I didn't realize to become a writer. It took me decades to figure out that you have to actually have to write to become a writer. It's part they don't tell you about, and
It doesn't just flow off the pen?
no, not at all. But in my 40s, I figured it out.
Wonderful. So all along from childhood, were you kind of writing here and there? Maybe not as your primary focus, but
Yes, here and there is definitely the right term for it.
okay.
In high school as an angsty, although an athlete, angsty kid, I wrote poetry. And I remember I had this. I was kind of a smart ass in school, hard to believe, but I had this English teacher who was a smart ass himself, older gentleman, and he liked me. We kind of battle each other for fun, and so there was some assignment and it involved poetry. So I wrote some funny stuff and I wrote some deep stuff, like I said, angsty. And so he telling me, he goes, I don't believe you wrote these. And I go, I got really pissed off. And then there was a funny one. I go, I believe you wrote this, but I don't think I go, no, I wrote these. I wanted to throw down. I was so pissed off. So it's
Yeah.
been in me my whole life. It's in the genes. My great aunt was Mary Chase, who wrote the play, which turned into a movie with Jimmy Stewart, called Harvey, about the Jimmy Stewart and
Wow.
his 6 foot invisible rabbit best friend.
Wow.
And so it's goes way back. And my that was on my father's side. And on my mother's side, my her grandmother wrote little kind of poetry as well, but never tried to get published or anything. It was a long time ago. But it would have been my great grandmother who I never met.
Yeah.
So it's in the genes, but I waited an awful long time to start doing it. But I always knew that I wanted to do it.
Okay.
Um, but I made the mistake of telling people that that's what I wanted to do. So then when I wasn't doing it, they'd be asking me, "How's the running going?" Oh, well, yeah, Um, but finally, at a certain age, when I was working for a golf company, and I'd seen many of them go out of business before, and this one was going down. I said, "Well, this is it." I think I was 42 or three. I said, "This is it.
Okay.
You can't pretend this is something you're going to do if you don't do it when this company goes under." Sure enough, it went under. I had some money saved up, and I wrote every day for like 5 or 6 months, and it was really one of the most happiest 6 months of my life, probably. Because I
Yeah.
realized whatever talent I have, I was finally doing it, and this is this is the talent He gave me to finally
Yeah.
use, and realizing every day when I wrote that I could do it, that I was something I could do and I love. even though I kind of hate it most of the time. I do love it. It's a love-hate relationship. But a guy I'd worked with, I was in the golf business for many years, and a guy I'd worked with called me, swear to God, it was within a week of me writing what I thought was a book, but it was really a first draft.
Okay.
But he said, "Hey, I need somebody over in the sports collectible company I'm working with in sales." And I said, "Well, Eric, I finally wrote that book. And very soon I will be getting an agent. She'll sell the book. I'll buy the house in La Jolla and I won't need a day job anymore. But, I will come over and help you out until that happens."
Okay.
And I worked there for 13 years.
Wow.
But I did write 5 books while I was working there. I finally did get published, and I wrote 5 books while I had the day job, which is very common for writers and specifically for mystery writers.
Yeah.
Um, we're not getting, a lot of us aren't getting rich at this point, but so yeah, but I was finally doing something that I really realized I was meant to do, and that was a great understanding. I felt like I'd wasted a lot of time. I was pretty old at that point, but on the other hand, I haven't had a tremendously exciting life, so I don't think I had a whole lot of life experience to write about before then. I think 10
Yeah.
years earlier would have been a better time to start. I'd probably have 10 more books out, but um, you get to be a certain age and you've experienced a lot of life just by aging, and you've a lot of love lost, and family members lost. So you are able to take real emotion and put it in fiction and situations that you've never been a part of, but the real
Yeah.
feeling. So that's kind of, I mean, that's, to me, that's the essence of what fiction writers are supposed to do: take real emotion that they felt and put it into something they never done.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so funny you say this because I've been reflecting on, I just hit my 1 year anniversary on the podcast.
Oh,
And
congrats.
I was thinking about it of like, if I would have tried to do this back in my 20s, like you said, you just have so much more life experience to be
Yeah,
able to talk to people and relate to people and come from it from a place of understanding. And it's not writing like you're doing, but I've been thinking about that of like life experience. It's not a bad thing, right? I really feel like it gives us a different position than when we,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if I'd been a soldier, if I'd been a cop, if I'd been a lawyer, probably should have started writing earlier. But you know, it came when it came, and I've been working pretty hard at it ever since.
yeah. So what for you, when you say, okay, I worked for this company for 13 years before I kind of just decided to then focus on writing, like what causes that perspective shift for you? You're like, you know what? I'm taking it and I'm going full time with the writing.
Well, it really was that time in between when this golf company went out of business. I had
Okay.
a little bit of money saved up, and because you asked me earlier if I was writing, here and there, and I was.
Okay.
I have a degree in English. That's what you're supposed to do. Either go to law school or write or wash dishes with the degrees, which I did when I got out of college. Then I worked my way up to being a manager of a restaurant. But yeah, it was that just realizing, because I don't think having a day job, you got to pay the bills,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so I didn't realize that I could set aside time every day and to get done what I need to do until I had a lot of time, until I really did it. I had no constraints in terms of the job or anything. So I really wrote every day, and I got in that rhythm of writing every day. And then when I got back working again, I was writing every day as well. And so having to be focused and disciplined to write every day while you had the day job really benefited me when I quit my day job 5 years ago.
Yeah.
To really have that discipline, because now I don't have a boss. I've got responsibilities, but so the discipline you build up by having that day job really
Yeah.
helped.
And I love that this underlying theme of writing was always a passion of yours. And like you said, okay, you have to go in other jobs, you have to pay the bills, right? But
Yeah,
it just persisted until it finally became your lifestyle, right? And that's
yeah,
such a cool story.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I would tell people for many years, yeah, I'm going to be a writer, because I didn't. I had that to keep me from having to pursue a career. There are a lot of very successful writers that are very successful in real careers. I worked in the restaurant business. Yes, I became a manager and did that for a few years, but then I basically went into sales, phone sales, working for in the golf company,
Okay.
a golf business rather, dealing with selling to retail, but still, I did I traveled a bit and did a lot of trade shows, but really I didn't feel I had a career, and I was okay with that because I'm going to be a writer, but I wasn't really writing, and so I
Yeah.
had pretty much a lot of guilt built up. But that's a good thing for, especially what I write. Guilt is a good thing to work with. So maybe that was some of the life experience I needed to have with guilt.
Who
But
knew?
so it was to finally do it, and then realize that I could do it. And while I had a day job, like I said, every mystery writer does it. But I felt like, well, I'm making up for that lost time because I am, earning my keep with my day job. We always call them day jobs. And yet
Yeah.
I was still turning out books, 5 books in 5 years, or no, 5 books in about 7 years, while I was working, and, got them published and all that, and still traveled, did conferences, did, some mini tours when the books would come out. So made all that work. So I kind of made up for being a slouch, I think, for all those years by just doing, double time when I had the day job.
Yeah. And I think to your point of structure, right? I mean, people really thrive on that when it's okay. Like I'm working 8 to 5, but I
Yeah.
still want to
Yeah.
make writing, my passion. I want to make that work. So, okay, I have from 5:30 to 10 p.m. to do what I need to do to get back to work tomorrow. And I think there's something to be said about that structure in your day versus like, okay, I can do whatever I want today, right? It's a little bit
Yeah.
harder to be so disciplined, like you're saying.
Right. And to be honest, it did take me after I quit my day job, it did take me more than a few months to get back into the rhythm of having specific times to write and being more disciplined. But as a writer, well, there's two things. The best thing I'm at in my entire life is not writing. I mean, I can do that really well. I can not write at any time. But also, as a writer, the more you're in the genre, particularly the mystery genre, the more responsibilities from outside are offered to you, and the whole mystery community. I don't know. I think I know. I've listened to some of your podcasts, which are really good. I know you talked to William Kent Kruger and other mystery writers. There's kind of
Okay.
this ethos in the mystery community that everybody helps everybody else. It's an amazing thing. I'd heard about it
Yeah.
from a woman who was kind of my mentor, Carolyn Wheat, for many years. She said, well, "You just you're a part of this people. It's amazing. They're amazing people, and
Yeah.
we're all competing for shelf space. If you think about it, me
Yeah.
and freaking Michael Connelly, we're competing for shelf space. I'm not really competition to him, but yet everybody helps each other out. It's a pretty cool thing. And so when people ask you to blurb a book, you feel responsible because you ask people, and then on your way up, also people have given you a hand. I'll say a hand, not a handout, but a hand down. You know, a,
Yeah.
a hand, giving you a hand, and so I've tried to do the same. Um, but so there are always a lot of different things you can be doing and not writing. Plus, there's always marketing. I mean, as a mid-lister like I am, and almost everybody. I mean, you think of speaking to Michael Connelly, who I had the pleasure of interviewing a couple of weeks ago
Oh, that's
for
cool.
Warwick's down in Coronado.
Okay.
Even he's traveling. He's a marketing. He's traveling. It's not. He's not doing his own traveling, but he is. I mean, he is the one on the road. So
Yeah.
everybody, you do have to market, and of course, the bigger you get, probably the more of your time is sapped. And so there's always that. It is a business. That's something that I kind of knew, but I didn't really know the significant, the details of it when I finally got published. Because you are your business, and you
Yeah.
have to treat it that way. And there's always something you could be doing, especially marketing. There's just always some little thing you could be doing. But marketing is such a nebulous thing
Yeah.
that you're throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks, and you're not even sure if it's stuck for a reason that time and maybe not another time. So it is very easy to um, waste time trying to figure out what's the next new marketing thing,
Yeah.
and I haven't
You're
found it.
speaking to my soul right now. The podcaster world is the same.
Yeah, I had a podcast for 4.5 years.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah, it is really, Same. You're like, okay, will
Yeah,
this stick? Will that stick? Will
I
this
have
work?
no
You know?
idea. I have no idea. Yeah.
So, do you like that switching gears though? Like you're using the in the creative, the writing process, and then you switch gears to then market the book after the publication. Do you like having that balance like that?
Here's what I like that surprises me because um, I am kind of a, I'm not kind of, I am a homebody. Um, I quit drinking about over 35 years ago. And once I quit, I kind of reeled back. My life got a little better under control, and I didn't really need to go out that much.
Yeah.
Um, and when I'm around a small group of friends, I am the center of attention often, but not in a bigger group. I can wallflower it pretty easily, but I found out that I really enjoy it. Public speaking is a very scary thing. And when I had to do my first book signings, I was really nervous about it. I still get a little nervous, which is good.
Yeah.
But I realized that I enjoy it. Public speaking. I really enjoy it more off the cuff than when I have to be prepared for something. And I enjoy meeting readers. It's one of my favorite things to do. Absolutely. And just when I do a talk, I really like to get to the Q&A because that they want to know certain things, maybe more so than I thought they wanted. I mean, I'm talking about what I think is interesting to them, but they're going to tell me what's interesting to them. So what surprised me and when I first got published is how much I learned to enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of I have a publicist. My publisher has a publicist, but I am always thinking about what can I do next. And my poor publicist, if I ever see somebody on social media and there's some reviewer I've never heard of, or they're on some podcast I've never heard of, I've shoot it, and then send it off to her, text it off to her. And she lives on the East Coast, so it's probably midnight or something. And I hope she
Yeah.
doesn't. I hope there's no ding on her phone when it comes across. But so you're always thinking about the marketing aspect and
Sure.
what the new next thing is. I actually made a. I'm rambling on here, but I guess in the guests I'm supposed to do that.
Yes, you
Um,
are.
I go to Lake Tahoe every year, and I kind of make these resolutions out on this pier at night before I go home. The next day before I go home. And I said, well, I want to challenge myself more in the marketing aspect this year, make myself do things that I wouldn't normally want to do. And one of them is probably teaching because my um, method process is so messed up that people have asked me to teach before. I can't. I mean, I can critique I'm a good critiquer. I've been in writers groups up
Okay.
until about a year ago for 20 years. So I have a point of view. I'm a good critiquer, and I've worked cross genres with many different genres. And I think that what I say is important, whether it is or not. So I'm
Yeah.
confident in that. But in terms of actually teaching the writing and all that, I'm not confident at all. So, but I haven't done them yet, but a couple opportunities have just arisen. So
Wow.
I'm going to do that. So I am challenging myself to do things that'll make me uncomfortable, more
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
This brings up a great point. So, in your writing process, where are you getting your ideas for your books?
Topical events, some news that'll bleed its way into my writing. And there was my second book, Night Tremors. I took an actual case that I'd seen on, gosh, it was both. It was on Dateline and 48 Hours. It was a guy,
Okay.
I think he was 17, and he was convicted of killing his parents. And they would show it, and those shows always have a point of view, and the point of view basically was he didn't do it. And so, and it was unusual to have two networks do the same case,
Yeah.
and they every year there'd be an update on this guy, and like he's innocent. And I go online, how can I help? Because this
Yeah.
guy's in jail for something he didn't do. And then finally, I think it took 10 years or more, and he got out.
Wow.
So I took the idea of this guy. He wasn't, our first person protagonist, Rick Cahill. He's a private eye. So Rick would be involved in this case to try to get this guy out of prison. And
Okay.
I twisted it all over. I mean, just that little premise is what started it for me.
Yeah.
A kid killing his parents under adult age, but the rest is completely fictionalized.
Yeah.
So there's that, and there's just little things like in Odyssey's End. There's something on cryptocurrency, which I did a fair amount of research on, and I still don't understand.
That's what I wasn't gonna. I was very impressed when you said that because I'm like, it's a whole world out there.
Oh my gosh. But Rick didn't really have to understand it completely either. And so in conversations he had, there's enough information that I asked my editor at the end, I said, hey, when I turned it in, I said, is there enough of the machinations of cryptocurrency? Is there enough? And then she said, yeah, it's good. It's fine. I mean, you don't have to data dump as you don't have to know everything and bore your readers with all this cool stuff you
True.
learn, but still cryptocurrency, I don't really get it. So there's usually something like that. I did in Doom Legacy. No, Last Redemption, I think. Yeah, Last Redemption. I had something to do with the something I'd seen. I was kind of searching for 23andMe type thing.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That was
The
going to be kind
genealogy.
of the main plot. And then how the rabbit hole comes up. I found something about that somebody thought they were very close to being able to predict cancers. And I thought, wow, what a boon that would be for the pharmaceutical industry if they could get that, be a part of that and then prescribe drugs that would help inhibit whatever you're, decades in advance. I mean, you'd be a lifetime on this one or two particular drugs, whatever they were. So that was one I just fell into, and I found it much more
Yeah.
interesting than I was trying to write. So, I did a fair amount of research on that. I've got a friend of mine, David Putnam, who's a good writer. He's a former he's a former cop. He's done everything as a cop. He's really a former sheriff's deputy, but he's done everything. He even worked for
Wow.
Y50. So I can always pick his brain for things in that world.
Yeah.
But really, for me, the main thing is I've been writing this one character, first person, Rick Cahill,
Yeah.
is yes, I have an idea for the main plot line. And I see the end of it out there. I see this target. It can get nebulous to me, but I know where to point as I write.
Okay.
But then how it really comes together for me is the major subplot for Rick. What's going on in his life? And there's always something, and it's generally difficult. So, what difficulties is he going through? We're taking this case, any case, or this case in particular, that'll make his life more difficult. And so, once I get that subplot nailed down, and that comes very quickly to me.
Okay.
Um, then the story kind of builds around it. If that makes any kind of sense, I'm always kind of amazed when a reviewer will say, well, it's well plotted. And I'm thinking, well, if you only knew the truth, because the plot really goes upon, to some degree, like I said, I can see the end out there, but I have to get
Yeah.
there. So it's the actions Rick takes is where the plot goes. And it has to be true to the story around him, but I build it from what would he do here, and then how will that make things worse? Always looking for worse. And so then I kind of build my way to the ending from there. But in revision, you're cutting out, you're smoothing off the edges, and eventually it all comes together. But it's not a straight line at all. It's
Yeah.
very crooked.
I love that. Thank you for sharing your process of that. As you were talking, I was wondering too, I have never asked any of the authors I've had on, when does the title come to you? Or are you trying to fit a title onto this at the end?
Mostly. I know some
Okay.
authors that start with the title, which is a great
Wow.
thing to have if you can, because then it really
Yeah.
points you to where you want to go. For me, it's not that way at all.
Okay.
The title comes usually organically through something. I'm writing in first person, as I mentioned, so basically in Rick's head the whole time. So something he's either thinking about, or through dialogue, or through some action. That's how the title comes about.
Okay.
My first title was Yesterday's Echo, and my publisher really liked two-word titles after that. So I
Yeah.
have to drill everything down to two words. And some have come, they all do. Well, there's been a couple times where they didn't come organically through the book. And
Okay.
so when I had thought of a great title, then I would end up putting it in the story and
Yeah.
where it made sense. But I remember the first book, I had a crappy title, and then I think I worked it out before I turned it in. We got to a better title. I had a really bad title for many years because it took me 10 years to get published. So the next book, which became Night Tremors, I had a bad title. I knew it was a bad title. I turned it in because I thought, well, they could come up with a title. And
Yeah.
so my editor said, well, this title isn't very good. And I said, I know. Let me know what you think. And they said, no. So no, I need a title from you, and I need it. And she gave me some time frame, and I don't remember what it was, but it was pretty quick, a couple
Yeah.
days or something. But once she gave me a deadline, I had it within 15 minutes. It just
Wow.
coalesced for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I'm looking at my books behind me. Odyssey's End came late, but not after.
Yeah.
Your Legacy was after. I had to push it, and then it
Okay.
works. I think it works well. But then because I do like it seemingly be organic from the book, even though I'm
Sure.
shoving it back in. So, but most of them, there's only one that came really early, and that was Blood Truth,
Okay.
my fourth book, and that was Rick is wondering. He's this backstory of his father before him, who had been a cop and thought to be a bad cop, and he's died. He was an alcoholic after he was kicked off the force. And so Rick has carried that dark cloud. Rick had his own problems being a cop. So he's carried that dark cloud around him. In that book, he solves the puzzle. But
Okay.
in it, he's wondering, am I my father's DNA? Is it, is the truth in the blood?
Yeah.
So, and that's something he'd struggle with all throughout the series. Um, so that one I had early. I had really early, but generally they come late. I don't
Okay.
worry about it. Oh, it's funny. What I'm writing now is something very different, but I actually had the title first. Yeah, I have the title first. Whether it stays or not, I don't know. I have to get the book finished and
Yeah.
sold. But yeah, so it's a rare occasion when I have it first, but everything's subject to change.
Yeah. I love that it's kind of all over the place, but I'm like, as you were talking, I'm like, well, I've never asked any of my authors that. But, again, you've run a podcast yourself, and sometimes I feel like putting a title on it in like a concise format, that's a really hard thing to do.
It is for me. Well, like I said,
Yeah.
some people, that's the first thing I have. Title.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
Hmm. Um, well, I think all writers are trying to work things out, but I would say, fiction writers.
Sure.
I think we're all trying to work things out internally.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've learned that I can be more disciplined when I need to be. But I learned something just last year, I think that surprised me. It was the strangest. It was a writers conference. It was at the BoucherCon, the big, huge mystery writers conference. And every year it's a different city. It was in San Diego this year. Last year
Okay.
was in Minneapolis, and it was a very odd panel called. It had something. It was like grief and private eyes or something, which is like what bizarre.
Yeah.
And rookie moderator, God bless him, but it took a long time to get to me, even with the first question.
Okay.
So the guy next to me, who's a friend who plays in our traveling poker game at all these conferences, he's my age or a little older, and he said, I haven't really had to deal with grief. I did lose my parents, but they lived a full life, and he said I've never had to deal with anything like that, and it hit me that I got really emotional, and because our family suffered a tragedy, we lost someone very young at when she was just day before her 16th birthday,
Wow.
and she was my niece.
Okay.
And I have my entire family was, really um, struck by that. She was a wonderful kid and would have been a
Yeah.
wonderful person. She was a wonderful person, would have been a wonderful adult.
Yeah.
And I saw what it did to my sister and my brother-in-law. And I know what it did to me. There was something that all my life has risen up. This emotion would rise up when I think about it. Sometimes it's really difficult. And I realized that as I was talking, I was getting emotional, and the audience was great. But I realized that that's what my books tend to be a little melancholy. They're not. There's humor.
Yeah.
There's violence. But there's a kind of this undertone of melancholy. Not annoyingly so, hopefully. But I at that point, and I always kind of wondered why. As I said, my life's been fairly easy, but then I thought, well, no, there's been some tragedies in my
Yeah.
family's life. And I realized, and this was only a year ago, that this is something that I really have been working on. And that's the undercurrent of melancholy. And also, I realized in writing this book, Odyssey's End, that the last three books have really been about family. And I don't have children. The timing in life didn't work out for me on that.
Yeah.
And I realized that Rick, now that he has a family, he never expected to have one after he lost his first wife to murder before the first book. He thought I'd never be a father. And circumstances as I wrote Rick all these years, he fell in love again and he became a father. And it's a miracle child for him. And it's the main thrust. It changed his life. It's the main thrust of his life, his responsibility for his child, even as his family is split up. I realized that my last three books have really been about family. This one more consciously,
Yeah.
and that's something that I think that also has my mind's been working on and my heart for years. That I've skated by and not tried to think too deeply about. But I really think um, it's probably a little deep for the conversation, but that's something that has made me realize that the not having a family's had greater significance than I thought it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had other authors that have said similar, like it's almost a form of therapy, right? It's
Yeah,
allowing you to process your own world
I think
in
so.
that form. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes you don't, I mean, there's some books where, you're not, there's no consciousness of it at all, but
Yeah.
you probably still are working something out.
Yeah. All right. So we have Odyssey's End is out now. Came out in mid-November, right?
Right. 2 weeks ago
Okay.
today, as we record.
Awesome. I will say that I listened to the Yesterday's End, right? The first one.
Yesterday's Echo.
Echo. Sorry.
It's all right. You
I
start with Echo and then you have end possibly being
Yeah,
the end.
that's what
So
I think
yeah.
that's what I did. There's my tired brain showing up. But on audio, and I flew through it because I was like, I want to know what's going to happen. I got to know what's going to happen. So I really enjoyed it. And I liked the
Thanks.
banter in the book too. I caught those underlying tones of the humor there.
Yeah. Good. Because the books get darker as you go, and Rick needs the humor. And
Yeah.
luckily, there is humor in a character that I never anticipated having called Moira McFarlane, who's a private investigator, and she shows up in the second book. And I wanted Rick to be isolated, never to have any friends, and which I would have liked, but really I wouldn't have had 10 books if I kept it that way. And so I needed Moira for one scene, and they started talking to each other, and kind of as a brother sister type situation.
Yeah.
And there's more banter to come, actually.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Gonna get
Thanks.
book two here on my next Audible credit. So
Thank you.
all right, well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about who you are as a reader and what genres you enjoy reading.
Well, boringly, you might say, I read the genre I write in. I've read it all my life. I read mystery slash
Okay.
crime. I would go back to Agatha Christie, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Those are my two early influences. Um, I've always read mystery. I read, I do read nonfiction as well, but really, if I want to get a book, I'm going to go get a mystery. I always think in terms of overall crime. There's a lot of subgenres,
Yeah.
but that's what I read, and I don't have a problem. I know some writers can't read the genre while they're writing it. I don't, I don't have a problem. It took me so long
Yeah.
to get published that I did develop my own voice
Yeah.
out of necessity, so that I don't worry about copying anyone.
Sure.
Um, I do cheat from Michael Connolly because my guy's a PI, but he's got the cop stuff down so well that whenever I read something in his book, something I didn't know about police procedure, even though my guy's a PI, he used to be a cop, and he's going to come up against cops.
Yep.
I will dog ear it, which some people don't like to hear if you dog ear a book. I'll dog ear it, and I'll go back and I'll put that in the file. It's just not something I'm going to copy, but some piece of knowledge that is a benefit to me as
Yeah.
a writer. He did the research for me. Yeah.
There you go. I love that. So, how do you find time to read within your day? Like, what's your structure like here?
Uh, Well, I mentioned earlier about the the mystery community and everybody helping each other out. I'm a slow reader, so
Okay.
I pretty much almost always have a request for a blurb going. You know what a blurb is, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm reading a lot of blurb material. I just knocked off two blurbs today
Okay.
after doing extensive reading. So um, I'm reading every day, but
Yeah.
generally it's out of responsibility.
Yeah.
Uh, So when I mentioned Michael Connelly a lot, but he's one of my favorite authors. When a Connelly book comes out, when a T. Jefferson Parker book comes out, when Robert Crace book comes out, I pretty much drop everything and I'll just go buy the book and read it for pleasure.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty quick read. But generally, and there's you're also asked to judge some awards and things like that. So it can be if you do the Edgars, there's just you have no pleasure reading for that year. You are
Yeah.
One year I did the Shamus and the Edgar Awards.
Wow.
So that was the Shamus is probably not nearly as big as the Edgars in terms of reading, but yeah, I'll never do that again. I always tell
Yeah.
myself this is the year I say no, and not to be negative or mean, but you do have to prioritize your own writing at times. But then you have people say yes to you when they're really busy too. So it's hard
Yeah.
for me to say no.
It's almost like the setting the boundary, right? Of like, okay, I
Yeah,
know that I have this project that I need to be working on, so I need a boundary here. It's not that you don't want to be a part of it, but you just can't do
right.
it all.
But when you set that boundary, what usually happens is someone who did you a solid asks for a favor and like, well, I can't, you know. Like a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, I'd won two Shamus Awards back to back. And so they asked me to be a judge for a different category that I'm in the next year. And like, how can I say no? That's when
Yeah.
I had the Edgars and the Shamus. But how can I say no? They just gave me an award.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that guilt.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit of that.
Irish Guild.
Our
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've also so graciously prepared a book flight for us today. Can you tell us a little bit about how they pair together?
Yeah. You want to mention the books?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whichever way you want to do it.
So I started with The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. I read that in college.
Okay.
So it was a long time ago. But my dad did give me The Simple Art of Murder, which was Raymond Chandler's kind of treatise on writing mysteries, and he kind of took a
Okay.
shot at Agatha Christie and the English writers. he's,
Okay.
he's a little opinionated, but there were a lot of short stories in there, which he only wrote seven novels, but so I don't think I read a couple of his novels and a lot of his short stories in high school, and then when I went to college, I took a private eye course for my I have an English degree, and that was a private eye course
Okay.
by Professor Steiner. I remember him well, and he gave us The Long Goodbye by Chandler, which I maybe it was his second or third book. I can't remember exactly which one, but to me, it's the best. It's not as most well known, but it's close. And it's kind of what. Of course, this is before. I mean, I thought I was going to be a writer. I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't really. I was young. I wasn't like putting the nuts and bolts together.
Sure.
But in I think this was in I'm going to read just something. It's a Chandler kind of on what the PI should be or his hero should be. So I
Okay.
just want to read a brief thing because it kind of sets the state because Chandler he's thought of being one of the top. There's Chandler, there's Hammett in terms of men,
Sure.
and Ross McDonald, who was much more
Okay.
prolific than either one of them. And I read them all. But Chandler was kind of the gold standard thought to be, and so I realized that he was sort of setting the stage for those of us who came later, and because my guy does have a code that he lives by, and I
Yeah.
don't even know. I mean, that was probably osmosis from Chandler because I didn't. I remember part of this, but anyway, I'll just read it.
Okay.
Down these mean streets, a man must go who is not himself mean, who is neither tarnished nor afraid. He is the hero. He is everything. He must be a complete man and a common man, and yet an unusual man. He must be, to use a rather weathered phrase, a man of honor, by instinct, by inevitability, without thought of it, and certainly without saying it. He must be the best man in his world and a good enough man for any world. there's more, but I think that really hits
Yeah.
it on the head. And for me, there's definitely a connection between my guy, Rick Cahill. If you'll notice the initials, RC, Rick Cahill, Raymond Chandler. That was
Oh, okay.
my nod to Chandler all these years ago when I started writing him. But Rick has a code too, and it was handed down to his father, which is um, I put it in every book. Let me see. Sometimes you have to do what's right, even when the law says it's wrong, which is a
Yeah.
little different than what Chandler's saying, but it's a code that Rick definitely lives by. And he is all the things that Chandler said, but he's also there's more darkness here, and there's more hazy lines. But he does think he's doing the right thing always.
Yeah.
But as the books go on, he begins to wonder, well, don't megalomaniacs think they're doing the right thing too? When you've made yourself judge, jury, and executioner, isn't that isn't that evil? And there's been times when he has been all three.
Yeah.
People who are bad people, but weren't necessarily doing. I mean, he's killed people not in self defense. He's thinking of future self defense, and he's thinking of saving people he knows. So he's kind of crossed the line, but he does live by this code, and he is a man of honor, unquestionably. And but I think really get away from me is that Chandler kind of set the stage for this kind of this man above all, but a common man. He does say, but he's a common man also. And to me, that really nails what I've tried to do. And in the long goodbye, you can pick any Chandler book, but in the long goodbye, I can't remember the guy's name that Chandler meets. He's some drunk, Terry something,
Okay.
but you can tell he's a kind of a ne'er do well, but he's seemingly of some wealth. And this is back in the probably 40s when Chandler's writing it, and he's drunk on his ass. He's kind of getting not he's metaphorically getting kicked while he's down. And for Philip Marlowe, Chandler's protagonist, he just can't. He could go away, but he just even though the guy's drunk and he's made his own bed, but he has to help him. That's the honorable thing for him to do. And in helping him, they become kind of drinking buddies. And the guy's clearly effed up. But when he gets involved, and so Chandler Marlowe doesn't owe him anything.
Yeah.
But when he gets accused of a murder, this is they're not great friends. They haven't known each other that long. Chandler feels a responsibility. Marlowe, sorry, Marlowe feels a responsibility to help to try to get to the truth of the matter, and that's also kind of a theme throughout all the Private Eye novels,
Yeah.
the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And because it is the right thing to do, he can't let it stand that this guy is probably innocent and he may go to jail. And just by happenstance, this guy came in his life, but he feels, I think, I'm putting words into Chandler and Marlowe's mouth. It's been a while since I read it. That he feels responsible for the person, and that's what my guy does too. Rick Cahill, once he gets involved, he feels responsible. And the other books I chose, Devil in a Blue Dress by Walter Mosley, which I think came out in '90,
Okay.
and that's Easy Rollins, a great movie, by the way, with Denzel Washington. Probably the greatest living actor we have, I think.
Yeah.
Great role, and I think I read the book before I saw the movie, but once again, he Easy in this book because there's I think 15 or more of the Easy Rollins books, but this is the first one.
Okay.
He needs money. He bought a house. He just came back from the war. He lost his job at the factory he was working at, but he's got a mortgage. He's got to pay his mortgage. So he ends up working for a guy who's he knows is kind of a bad guy. He's kind of a small time, well not call it medium time bad guy, criminal, but he needs the money.
Yeah.
And then he gets involved in some things, and then ultimately he has to do some somewhat innocence get involved, and he has to do what's right. He has to go against um, this person who's been paying him, and he has to do the right thing. And there's with Chandler, Marlowe had been a cop, but he's always going up against, the cops from LA that time. They kind of ruled the roost there with billy clubs.
Yeah.
And he took his beatings, but he lived by his, he had to do what was right. He just, instead of maybe taking the easy way out, he would get his lumps by doing what he thought was right. And Easy Rollins is the same way.
Yeah.
And Silent Joe by T. Jefferson Parker. I mean, you got T. Jefferson Parker and Walter Mosley, two of the greatest mystery writers living, and then probably many think to be Raymond Chandler the best of all
Okay.
time. Um, and Silent Joe, there's this, I'm forgetting his last name, but Joe is his biological father hideously scars him with battery acid on his face. So
Wow.
he's a hideous looking person.
Yeah.
And yet he's later adopted, and he is by his father, who's kind of a famous in Orange County or whatever part of Orange County it is, politician.
Okay.
And Joe, he's also a sheriff's deputy who's in Orange County. When you're a sheriff's deputy, you have to work a certain amount of years in the jails before you can get out on patrol. And that's what Joe's doing. He's working in the
Okay.
jails during the day, but at night he drives his dad around, who he worships, to he's kind of his bodyguard and also his enforcer when needed. Because his
Mm.
dad he realizes his dad, well, he loves him and he's wonderful and he saved him, but he's maybe involved in some shady things. And then he ends up getting murdered on Joe's watch. And so Joe can't let that stand. But the more he investigates, the more he realizes his dad was very iffy. But still, he has a sense of, and somewhat revenge, but also justice. I have to bring justice to the matter. And all the guys I mentioned, the characters I mentioned, there has to be justice in the world, I think. And I think that's true, even though they may come from different places, but ultimately at the very end, they have to bring justice to an unjust world. And
Yeah.
that's how I think The Flight kind of comes together. For me,
Yeah.
they were just all great influences on me as a writer. I mean, like I said, I read Raymond Chandler, young and older, and Walter Mosley, Devil in a Blue Dress, had a great effect on me. I wasn't. It was in 1990 when it came out. I probably read it within a year when it came out.
Okay.
I wasn't. I had this thing where I was going to be a writer, but I wasn't doing anything about it.
Sure.
But when I read Silent Joe, I was a neophyte writer trying to figure out what I was doing, and I got a completely different idea of how to write a mystery from Jeff Parker, in that character is king. And the other thing about Joe is that he was he was gargoyleish, just kind of like one side of his face, but he
Okay.
had this kind of heart of gold that even though, and he kind of, he was an enforcer for his dad, but he was an honorable man. He was the hero that Chandler talked about. And he never lost that. He was always the best man there.
Yeah.
And so that really resonated with me. And I've got my guy, Rick Cahill. He doesn't know if he's that best man anymore. He is trying to bring justice to an unjust world, but he questions himself, like I mentioned earlier. Am I, am I in the right here?
Yeah. And I
So I would
imagine,
recommend those books to anybody, any one of them,
yeah.
to anyone. They're great, great writers, all.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of these as you've been talking about them. I'm thinking about from the character perspective, if you're faced with that, like bringing justice to the unjust world, or being the judge, jury, the executioner, all with, in your day-to-day life. I mean, you have to live by an honor code to stay true to yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah. Or you
yeah,
become, or you become what you think you're trying to save the world from.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that, like, back to your initial quote from Chandler, right, about the being a common man,
Yeah.
I think most of us all have, if you ask them, like, what are three things that are important to you? I mean, we all have probably our own type of honor code that we are living by.
Right. We'll
Um,
try to live by. Yeah.
Trying, yes,
Yeah.
trying to show up like that every day in your life. And So I think that brings that commonality factor of like, well, we're all out here. I mean, I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt, but most of us are probably out here trying to live by an honor code to show up in this world as a good human.
I think that's true. And I think it's
Yeah.
something that you do have to give thought to, because it's easy when no one's watching to do the wrong thing. And I do it
Yeah.
plenty. But it is something that you need to give. It's interesting you said that because it's something over the last year I really tried to work on. So, yeah, obviously the world would be a better place if we all kind of were better at it. But yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're all out here bumbling around, but I feel like I have my kids are young, so I feel like I'm the example right now,
Right.
right? So I
Yeah.
really feel like I'm living this day in, day out of like, well, what do I want to show them?
Yeah.
How do I want to show up in my day? Because I could say something till I'm blue in the face, but they're going to do my example. So what
Right.
is it that is? So
That's a huge responsibility.
yeah. So I don't know. Just was resonating as you were talking about it. I think that's the commonality piece for us, right? Is that we all have our, and it's going to be different for everybody, and that's fine. That's what makes us human.
I will say the one thing, the other connective tissue to me is that through all these books, it's people think these aren't really thrillers, but everything's called a thriller nowadays. But really, character is king with all these,
Yeah.
and that's what I think people that don't read the genre, best books in the genre, may not understand that writing mysteries you can just by this I learned from Ross McDonald from a class I took. He wasn't there, but just by having to investigate a clue, a private investigator can go through any strata of society to follow the clue and bring light to it. So there's, the I when I read Chandler, I don't remember you had a question. I'm going to cheat here about rereading, and
Yeah.
Chandler I reread when I can, but I don't remember this plot. I just remember the characters. I remember the man of honor,
Yeah.
which is great when you don't remember the plot because then you can just keep reading over.
Yeah.
Um, but that's what resonates. I think that's what resonates with a lot of people that read mysteries or read crime is that it's the characters that count.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's same. I try to read a lot of genres, but if I'm resonating with the characters, I'm already going to like the book probably
Right.
more in my mind, right? It's already going to be, oh yeah, I really liked that because I was resonating with the characters or I could relate to the characters.
Hmm.
So, I mean, you don't have to relate to all the characters. That's not it. But right, like you want them to win.
Yeah. I had when I was in Warwick's a couple weeks ago for the launch, a woman came up to me and said, I had to put Rick down. I'm like, oh, great. There's a
Oh
lost
no.
reader. She goes, he gets me so angry. But then I picked it up again, of course, and I finished it, and I'm here to buy the next book, which is exactly, I mean, that is walking the line that I wanted to be on, is that Rick's not going to be for everybody, but there's going to be a strong emotion.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope for, and being able to win them back.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's because the character meant something to her, and then he disappointed her. He can kind of continues to make some bad decisions that disappoint them, the readers, which I think is fun.
Yeah. Well, and like you said with Chandler, right? Like it's you're remembering the characters, and that's what's going to linger with them long after the
Yeah,
plot of the story is going to be that character. So I like
hopefully,
that.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this great book flight with us today. So, how I end our episodes here is with our bonus pairing. So, these are just a speed round of questions. We will kick it off with what is one book you have read that has intimidated you?
Well, I'm just going to say anything written by Megan Abbott,
Okay.
because she writes with such depth that, and I've said this before, when I read her and then I go back to writing my own stuff, I feel like a cowboy when they ask him to sign the deed or something, and he just writes an X across the paper because she's just so. She's very literary, but she writes really. She's kind of known for domestic suspense now, but she's written a lot of different things. She wrote Hard Boiled early in her career,
Okay.
The writing is so, and I mean, I say dense, but I don't mean that negatively. There's just so much going on, and the vocabulary, it's really great stuff. I get intimidated whenever I pick one of her books up.
Okay. All right. I've not heard of her, so I'm
No, you
excited
should
and
check her out.
intrigued, yeah, to
Yeah,
pick one
she's
up.
really, really good.
Okay. Wonderful. And then what is one book that has changed your life?
I would say it was. I'll say two books I had tonight. One is Raymond Chandler, the Long Goodbye.
Okay.
That's when I wasn't, I thought I wanted to be a writer, but it wasn't anything I was really pursuing. But just the learn, because I read younger. I read Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, and Agatha
Sure.
Christie. And so when you're a kid, you're like black and white, good and bad. Here are the
Hmm.
puzzle pieces. Let's fix the puzzle. And then I read Chandler's like gray. this this piece doesn't fit here. As a 14-year-old or however I was, that's kind of where you are anyway.
Yeah.
So that changed my life, and just saying, wow, there's different ideas on mysteries and interesting. And when I read Silent Joe by Jeff Parker, I was taking this class from Carolyn Wheat at UCSD Extension, who I mentioned earlier. And
Okay.
I don't even think we were reading it. I think she just gave it to me. She said, I think you'll like this author. And I never heard of him. He's the only guy who's ever won 3 Edgars, but this was this second Edgar. And that's first Edgar he won with Silent Joe. But it really
Okay.
just showed me, and because I was taking classes. I was on a path to become a writer, but it just showed me that character was king. And that's,
Yeah.
to me, for me, it got me on the path of, this is what I want to write. I can't copy Jeff Parker. I don't want to. I'd have to do my own thing. I mean, I would love to copy him, but character is king, and that
Yeah.
that kind of just flipped a light on for me. He just had a big influence on me.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I think you've given us a show title. Character is king. I mean,
Not original. It's not original, but
okay. All right. Well, we'll think on that one. I'll think
no,
on
we
that
can
a
use
little
it.
bit
Go
more.
ahead.
Yeah.
There's no, we're not gonna get sued.
Yeah. All right. Well, and then lastly, what are you reading next?
Well, what I'm going to be reading next is a novel by Allison Brennan, and I'm just going to start because I told you I had two blurbs to finish. I
Yep.
got I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry, Allison, but I haven't opened it up yet. It's an advanced reader copy of her
Mm.
next book, and
Okay.
a new series she's writing. So I'm really excited to
Cool.
get into it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate all the time that you've given me.
I gave you a lot of time. I talked and talked. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Matt Coyle and his book flight of crime fiction Characters King books. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. I want to inspire a community of readers. So whenever you share a post about what you are reading or what you are reading next, especially if you have heard about it on the show, please tag us on Facebook or Instagram at Bookish Flights. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.